come across hundreds and hundreds of cases where children have been victims of various forms of violence, be it physical, be it psychological, and be it sexual. Now, if you ask me for examples, there are so many that I can talk of. But as you all must have been aware, that the recent case of severe physical, psychological, and sexual violence came from the case of the two very renowned doctors from Guwahati city who had illegally adopted two children and had unleashed the most severe forms of psychological, physical, and sexual violence on those two 3-year, 8-month-old children. A classic case of battered child syndrome, probably the first in Assam, where we have seen that these two children especially the girl child, had severe burn marks all over her body, had old fractures in some parts of her body. The boy children, on the other hand, had old and new tears in his anal area. So this was the most heinous form of violence against children that I have seen and probably would like to talk about. Because we still believe that to discipline children, we have to use some amount of physical violence, which I think is so prevalent because of it happening over the years. But slowly we have to come out of it. And interestingly, we have seen families which have adopted child management techniques which are violence-free. Now, this practice should now come into our society as well, or else, some families might use it as a measure of discipline, but this kind of escalates in some families, especially in families where parents are unable to control children, where children maybe are more mischievous, because of various issues that the children are themselves facing. Many children, very young children, face problems like ADHD, which parents who don't realize think that the child is mischievous, does not listen to us. So they unleash different forms of physical and mental violence. For example, they would lock up the children in a dark room for 2 hours for probably missing tuitions, or probably force feed children when they refuse to eat, which finally can lead to some higher forms of violence. In our own cases that we have dealt, we have seen, own fathers, own grandfathers unleashing sexual violence on children, which is so unfortunate because a child is supposed to be protected, in fact, most protected in their own families. But it is their parents, their caregivers who are actually abusing them. This is unfortunate. This should stop. It will stop with a lot of awareness. It will stop when we as a society stop accepting all forms of violence against children, because we should understand that if you look at sexual violence, it is just a subset of the larger violence that we so conveniently, accept in our life or in our society. We should be aware. We should reflect upon what are we nurturing in our homes. If we are nurturing violence in the form of domestic violence, physical violence against our children, mental violence against our children, then we would see a society that is rife with violence against children.
If we talk about child abuse, it could be in any form. It could be physical abuse, it could be sexual abuse, it could be verbal abuse, it could be in the form of emotional neglect and physical neglect, which all leads to a lot of harmful consequences for a child. The childhood experience is very important in the formation of the personality of an individual. So when a young child is exposed to trauma, in any of these forms, it causes marked changes in the brain development and in the overall development of the child. And in the long run, these lead to a lot of negative consequences, which could be in the form of predisposing the child to serious mental health disorders like depression, anxiety. It leads to low self-esteem, low self-confidence in the child, and often predisposes a child to develop behavior problems later on, which could be violence, aggression, or tendency to conduct problems or oppositional behaviors, which perpetuate a cycle of violence and crime in the society. Child abuse can happen anywhere, and it can happen or it can be done by anyone. In fact, we have seen parents who abuse their children. It could be biological parents, it could be step parents, or we see a lot of child labor where children are illegally employed as domestic helps or as workers in factories, where they are exposed to a lot of abuse or neglect. And this emotional traumas or physical traumas that can happen at this young age definitely leaves a very serious negative impact on the child's future. And we see that a child is having a pathological condition like there is severe depression or anxiety or some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, then definitely we give treatments. We often give medications so that the child is more relaxed and can come out of this depression or anxiety they may be in. And at the same time, gentle counseling, supportive therapy, and to bring them out of that adverse environment is very important. So once we identify an adverse environment, the first point is always to bring them out of that. And we have also to equip, if it's not possible sometimes, then the family approach is very important, where we equip the parents or the guardians to handle the situation better, to understand their children, and if they themselves have problems or if they themselves have mental health disorders, then the treatment, that treatment is also possible, needs to be conveyed to them. So it's a community-based approach, and especially for children who go to school, definitely the school also has a major role here. Teachers and school counselors are the first people often to, identify or spot any kind of such abuse that could be happening. And it's very important that the school programs or the school teachers and the counselors are very much trained in identifying this kind of problems.
See, parents must be very careful while dealing with children themselves. Secondly, they have a responsibility to inform their children of all forms of violence that are prevalent in the society, so that if such violence were to happen to children, they are able to protect themselves. So, small things like safe and unsafe touch. Secondly, stranger danger issues. Thirdly, what to do if they face any form of sexual violence. Not only that, if they face any form of psychological or physical violence while traveling, in school, in play areas, children should be empowered to respond. They should be empowered to come and report those matters to the parents, so that legal action can be taken and children can be further protected from any form of violence which may happen to them in the future.